Well, thank you very much for joining us on the news review belt of the show. And I'll be doing this, well, pretty much alone this morning. A bit of a lonely morning, but don't you worry, it's going to be exciting all the same. And so I'm going to look at the headlines and then, we shall dig into the contents fully. Let's start with the daily graphic. And it says additional $32 million required to complete Saglemi housing project. And Francis Asenso-Boakye, I should say, the Minister of Works and Housing, has been speaking to the issues. Graphic Zoom Lion launched national sanitation campaign today. We can't take child beggars, social welfare explains. And in fact, it's a matter I've been speaking about, the number of children on our roads, main stretches right here in Accra, especially on some stretches when you're going at almost every traffic light, you see them. Imagine going through from Jubilee House is spared, but moving from there to the 37 Military Hospital, to the next traffic light around Maxmart, to the next one around Opebia, to the next one at around the police station at airport, all the way to, you could say even on the Abri stretch, you'll see them. So what are some of the issues? We'll be delving into them. That's it with the daily graphic. When you go to pages 20 and so there's a bit of a mix-up here, 20, 21. Okay, so page 17 says 2020 elections highly successful. That's according to the Electoral Commission. Do you agree with that line of thinking? Then on page 20, build buffers against economic crises. That's according to Seth Tekbe. And for those of you who may see crises spelled C-R-I-S-E-S and wonder whether it's a mistake, no. It's just like, it's the plural form, just like bases and bases. The Ghanaian Times newspaper this morning, 3 completed projects left to rot in Gomua East District. I'll be telling you a bit more about that. NADMO TWMA demolish structures on waterways at Lashibi. And then 3 policemen, others in Sekwa killing, remanded. You've heard of that situation with the 3 police officers who someone who was in their custody. I'll be telling you a bit more about that. The Daily Dispatch, some interesting headlines this morning. Richard Nyama on Sam Jonah's speech. He indicted all governments and himself. And Arthur Kennedy on Sam Jonah's speech as well. You can find that on page 11 of the paper. J. Kufuor, former president, to Sam Jonah, proved that we are in a culture of silence. This is an interesting bit because if you listen or you pay attention to the backlash, you would ask yourself, do we heed or to be heeded? It's not that everything he said was kosher 100%, but are there no realities in there? Government will complete Saglemi Project regardless of criminal investigations. That's according to the housing. Oh, hi there. Welcome back. Our apologies, a bit of a technical glitch we had to address, but thank you for staying with us. And don't you forget, on the back of that footage you just saw, we do bring you the Riakoto Memorial Lectures. We'll be telling you a bit about that later on the show. But let's dig into the papers once more. The Finder now. Kaswa bulk supply to ensure reliable power supply. If you find yourself in that enclave, what is the power situation? How do you react? We'll ease traffic on Kpone Stretch. That's according to the roads minister. And so housing minister saying one thing, roads minister saying another. We just pray to see these things actually materialize. Auditor General orders Professor Dodo to refund 291,570 Ghana cedis. And of course, the bit about Saglemi. But mind you, while the Works and Housing Minister, Francis Asenso-Boakye, is saying that is going to be completed, there's going to be an additional, we're going to have to cough up an additional $32 million to complete it. I'll give you some details of that. Similar stories in the Ghanaian Publisher newspaper, but the only standout one would be this by Nana Kobina Nketiah V, who says to Ghanaians, we are to blame for the destruction of our forest and water bodies. Daily Guide, killer cops, civilians caged. Agrada turns to Christ amid fraud charges. You know, there's something interesting in this country. So, Ekuapem Polo has a bit of a taste of, being caged or having been given 90 days. All of a sudden, she comes out and is preaching against nudity. Now, Agrada, whom some would call a fetish priestess, in a way, she says she's now turned to Christ. Interesting times indeed in this country. Someone posted yesterday about the sort of Christianity we practice in this country. You'd realize that Christians are dominant in this country. Many of our leaders have been Christians. The question is, if we see the sort of rot we see in our country, and we are by and large Christians, what does that say of our Christianity? Food for thought. Food for thought. Kufuor slams Sam Jonah's claims and JB's driver testifies in murder trial. The Daily Statesman now. First Lady calls for robust health systems to deal with future pandemics. We're dealing with Saglemi, and then Kufuor challenges Sam Jonah. There's more on that situation in the Custodian newspaper. But power project, a $50 million power project to end low voltage in Kasua. This bit about low volta, Custodian newspaper. I don't know what you mean, but I'm sure you mean low voltage. Let's move on now to the Accra Times. Small budget for Parliament affects its capacity. And that's the Right Honourable Speaker, Honourable Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin. Joshua Kamba schools confused cadre corps. And yesterday, the UCF, that is the umbrella body when it comes to the cadres in the NDC, met at the party's headquarters, saying they are united and there's only one mechanism for securing accountability, and they'll wait for the party to actually deliver its verdict on the last election. Jinapo stamps his authority on fight against Galamsey. The final paper I'll take a look at is the Republic Press. Bagbin strikes again, says some parliamentary staff are paid for nothing. Kisia Jabing fit for SP job. Find out who's saying that. But of course, when I spoke to Edem Senanu yesterday, he differed. He felt that no, age isn't the problem, but he doesn't have the wherewithal when it comes to experience in fighting graft. And police grabbed 507 illegal immigrants in Bolga. So let's get into some of the papers and what they are saying this morning. I'll start from the end of the Daily Graphic newspaper. A social issue, a major one. We can't take child beggars. That's on the front page, is actually the banner headline. I'll just share my thoughts on that. It says the Department of Social Welfare has stated that the Medina Social Welfare Shelter in Accra is not in a position to take in child beggars from the streets. Consequently, the department has asked to be put in place adequate planning and interventions before child beggars are removed from the streets. Already, the police have indicated their intention to embark on major exercises to rid the streets of child beggars. But speaking to the Daily Graphic in Accra, the director of the DSW, Mrs. Comfort Asari, said such a move for now would not be practical, would be counterproductive. Accra streets have been inundated with the sordid spectacle for years. Now, speaking to the development, Mrs. Asari said adequate budgetary allocations, security, and psychosocial support were needed to provide counseling, and these were critical in temporary homes, including the Medina shelter, to facilitate the rehabilitation and upkeep of children. Now, there are a few kids in Medina. In 2018, the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection stated that it had renovated the Medina Social Welfare Shelter to house rescued street children. According to then Sector Minister Mrs. Cynthia Morrison, who spoke with the Daily Graphic at the time, the ministry had written letters to its supporting agencies for the needed support to operate the shelter efficiently, where the inmates would be fed and clothed and also trained to acquire skills. And all of this feeds into Section 16(1) of the Children's Act 1998. So like it or not, we like to talk about the fact that, oh, some of them are from Niger and Chad and from all these countries. But it's not a question. They are in our country. And as a country, we protect them. There are even laws governing foundlings. Okay, children you find on the street without parents, whose parents cannot be found, and all of that. The state is in charge of such children. So in this instance, all of these children on our streets, Child Rights International has been talking about them. They are not getting proper education, healthcare, questionable. And sometimes we have these elements and then we turn around and we are surprised when we see the other side of them. This is not to say, mind you, that all of them or even a lot of them end up being nefarious characters in society. But you leave them like that, all they know is to beg for money. When they grow up, they have no employable skills. Next thing you know, maybe they are turning into something that society does not want. And then whom do we blame? We sit down and watch the problem. And then when it escalates, we pretend we did not see the problem. Let's check out some more stories from the Daily Graphic newspaper. And European journalists killed after abduction. This is a story that is also captured in the Ghanaian Times. And it says, 2 Spanish journalists abducted near a nature reserve in eastern Burkina Faso have been killed, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said. Local security sources say an Irish national was also killed, though this has not been officially confirmed. The Europeans were part of an anti-poaching patrol that was ambushed by gunmen near Pama Reserve last Monday. A local soldier was also abducted. No group said it had carried out the attack. A very sad development there. And we've lost some of our European brothers. They were actually trying to help the drive, anti-poaching drive, but that's the sad situation there. More international news on the Daily Graphic. And pro-civilian rule protests in Chad turn deadly. At least 2 people were killed and 27 injured in Chad only yesterday as demonstrators took to the streets demanding a return to civilian rule after the military took control following President Idriss Déby's death last week. A woman died yesterday when anti-military protesters attacked a bus in N'Djamena, while a man was killed during demonstrations in the south of the country, prosecutors said. So it's turned deadly, basically, in Chad. Following the death of Déby, you know, his son, who is also a military general, was put in place rather than having the Speaker of Parliament step in. And now it's escalated. The people say they are fed up with military rule and they want to return to civilian rule. 1 or 2 more stories from the paper and then we shall move on to other newspapers. So let's do this one. 2 stories that I want to get into. And the paging, the numbering of the pages, the positioning, a bit worrying today. So you have to do some back and forth in the Daily Graphic. This one on page 17 says 2020 elections highly successful. And I throw it back to you. What do you think? The Electoral Commission has described the 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections as the most successful, well-coordinated, efficient and seamless election organized in the history of Ghana. Yeah, let that sink in. What do you think? It noted that the many systems deployed before, during and after the elections enabled the Commission to deliver successful elections compared to previous ones. But of course, the NDC disagreed. A deputy campaign manager for the NDC in the 2020 election, Dr. Alex Segbefia, challenged the EC's assertion of delivering free and fair elections. He said a number of issues were poorly handled by the EC, citing the failure to account for ballots, disenfranchisement of the people of Santro Kofi, Akpafu, Likpe, and Lolobi, Sal, if you like, on the eve of the election, the use of state security to intimidate voters as some of the negative elements. Others who at the event also spoke about the deaths that we recorded in that election. So it's up to us to weigh the pros and the cons and find out what exactly our assessment is as a people with regard to the election. How about, you know, it would be interesting if we had a national poll to find out whether people think the election was as successful as the EC says it is, or maybe even more successful. It would be interesting to know what people think on that matter. But if you live in Kasua, this one is for you. The Minister of Energy, Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh, has inspected work on the bulk power supply point substation currently being constructed at Kasua in the central region to improve power supply in and around the town. 60% of construction work has so far been done on the $50 million gas-insulated switchgear substation. So looks like positive outcomes when it comes to power supply. The Ghanaian Times now, and 3 completed projects left to rot in Gov't East District. That's on page 16. I'll take a quick look at that and deal with the police story on page 3 as well. So 3 completed projects constructed over 10 years ago meant to improve the lives of the fast-growing coastal fishing Gov't Nyanyano community in the Gov't East District of the Central Region have become white elephants and are deteriorating. The community projects are Nyanyano, a cold storage facility meant to help the fisher folk preserve their catches for the market, the small water system for the supply of potable water to the community, and the information communications center. The computers and the accessories stocked in ICT established. It goes on and on. But on a visit to the community last Monday, the Ghanaian Times found that the projects had been abandoned over years and left to go waste in the community as the buildings are overgrown with weeds and the surroundings unkempt. You know, I think about our country all the time, and sometimes I wonder whether, I struggle to say this, but whether we are all right upstairs sometimes. I know some people may be upset with what I am saying, but why do we do what we do? It's such a vicious cycle of underdevelopment. Even when we start projects, we don't finish them. You leave them, they are not completed. Another administration comes, leaves them for political reasons. We've been doing this since Nkrumah. At what point are we going to change the script? We want to flip the script, we want to be developed, we want our economy to be buoyant, and yet we keep repeating the same old mistakes. Is it Henry Ford who says, if you keep doing the same things you've always done, you'll keep getting the same results you've always got? I think that's it, simpliciter, right? I think there's a problem, serious problem in our thinking in this country, but I don't want to go on. I know some feathers are ruffled already, but hey, we say it as it is. Page 3 of the paper, 3 policemen, others in Sekwa killing, remanded, and 3 police officers allegedly involved in the beating and killing of a suspect at the Sekwa police station in the Bono region last week were yesterday remanded in police custody by the Sunyani Court, Circuit Court B, to prevent them from interfering with ongoing investigations into the matter. So that's the long and short of it. Now, all 6 preliminarily charged with conspiracy to commit murder and murder are to reappear in court on May 11 this year. So that's what I'll do with the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Which one do we do next? How do we talk about the Sam Jonah situation? That's one that is of interest. And on page 11, a number of people talking about that. So Sir Sam Jonah is trending. Last week, before a Rotary Club audience, the former Anglo Gold boss gave voice to what most Ghanaians have been thinking for some time. So let's assess whether that is what all of us have been thinking. He articulated some truths and called our nation to action. He said, our constitution lacks the needed separation of powers needed for balance between the branches. And today, as we do Riakoto, we'll be talking about the constitution as well on the end of human rights. He said, corruption pervades all aspects of our governance system. He said, we are borrowing for consumption and debt servicing and wondered how those debts would be paid, reality or not. He said, we are depleting our natural resources recklessly, true or false. In response, there were 2 reactions. The masses gave him a thumbs up by sending the speech re-echoing around social media with their fingers. The Praetorian punditocracy attempted to rebut and to nitpick and to attack the messenger to no avail. And this, by the way, is by this piece I'm reading is by Dr. Arthur Kobina Kennedy. You know him. So I don't need to expatiate on that. As Kweku Bako is inclined to say, Mr. Jonah's speech must be analyzed for further particulars, but it deserves commendation, not condemnation. The tone was respectful, the substance was important, and the style was straightforward, and the failings are bipartisan. First, he recommends constitutional reform. Second, he called for steps to put Ghanaians at the commanding heights of our economy. Third, he advocated for industrialization. Finally, he desires educational reforms. I don't know, are you against these things that he says? Do you feel it is the reality he reflected in that speech he gave? I think the verdict is out there. Maybe this might not be a court of law to address it, but the court of public opinion. But in a sharp rebuttal, we have the gentle giant, yeah. Former President Kufuor also reacts, and he says, prove why you say we are in a culture of silence. Now, former President Jonah Kufuor has reacted to Sam Jonah's piece, and he says, so for a man like Sam to speak the way you are citing him or quoting him, it suggests perhaps he got some evidence, but at least he's spoken. They say freedom is not handed on a silver platter. Sometimes you fight for it, and this is part of the uses of the media we are talking about, to dare to speak up to uphold public interest. That is what he said. He added, Sam, a very responsible member within the community, to say that should not be treated casually. He must have something he is advocating, and it is not for me to dispute him. I'm just saying when you allege, you must prove it. And so that is the former president's point, basically, that he wants to make. If you allege, you must prove it. Let's do this final one right before we go on My Joy Online. Saglemi housing cost rises to 229 million. That story is on page 2 of the Finder newspaper. So we're going to have to cough up an additional $32 million to complete the controversy-ridden Saglemi housing project. This will bring the total cost of the project to $229 million for 1,502 housing units. This means each housing unit will cost some $152,689.3 for a project dubbed as affordable housing. I think that's the crux of the matter. Now, 5,000 units were approved by Parliament. The original output target of the project was 5,000 units at a total cost of $200 million as stipulated. So we have to ask ourselves as well whether we are getting value for money and where the problems were. If there were problems in terms of the contract, in terms of the funding, where are the heads that are to roll? And even as we justify whatever may have happened, do we leave it in the meantime to rot? So a basket of issues to contemplate. But let's take a quick look at myjoyonline.com. The returned bride, FDA sacks embattled Cynthia Dapa in tow for misconduct. That is in there. And some more stories we're going to be looking at. This one, actually, the next one says, power fluctuation will support, let me just get that one. Power fluctuation will soon be over. That's according to the Energy Minister. There's no age limit for special prosecutor role. Gary Nimakotu Inusa Fusaini. 3 police officers, others involved in death and secret burial of farmer at Sekwa charged, remanded as well. But others also saying that Kisia Jabing is too young. Let's wrap up on this point. We have a birthday wish to Victoria Ochiokpo of the University of Cape Coast from your friends and family. Victoria, we wish you a very happy birthday. Happy birthday also to Obapa Erin Jameshi, daughter of Constable Sarah Anaman of Ghana Police Headquarters Communications, from Constable Asamoah Bright. Happy birthday to you as well. Happy birthday to Juliet Oforiata, women's organizer for Ayawaso West Wogon. Wishing you God's blessings, long life and prosperity from Frima and all your children. Well, it's on that celebratory note that we wrap up the news review this morning. Coming your way next is sports. Do stay.